Spider-Man No Way Home is the long-awaited and latest Marvel Cinematic Universe film release that's out now exclusively in theaters. This is the third and final entry into director Jonathan Watt's Spider-Man trilogy, and once again we have rising megastar Tom Holland, as well as a plethora of supporting actors including Zendaya, Benedict Cumberbatch, Jacob Batalon, Jon Favreau, Jamie Foxx, Willem Dafoe, Alfred Molina. It's quite the stack up for one single project. Obviously this is one of the biggest, if not the biggest, movie event of 2021, and therefore I don't want to spoil anything for anyone. This is going to be a spoiler-free review. Let's go. No Way Home picks up immediately after the concluding events of Far From Home, wherein Peter is having a hangout day with MJ and suddenly has his entire life flip upside down as his true identity is revealed by J. Jonah Jameson through Mysterio's last efforts. As his life begins to go haywire, from becoming the most famous person on the planet, to his friends and family getting patronized and harassed by the public, to simply being unable to have a good night's sleep, Peter decides to visit Doctor Strange in the hopes of helping to alleviate his situation. Strange agrees to aid him at the cost of everyone in the universe forgetting about his existence, and upon Peter's last-minute changes, the powerful spell accidentally breaks open the multiverse. After getting scolded by Strange for his carelessness, Peter begins finding himself in his limelight on what it means to be a hero as villains from other Spider-Man realities begin surfacing into his world. Honestly, it's sometimes bittersweet doing a review for a movie like this one because, wow, we've waited quite some time and many postponements later for this to come out. And it feels significantly longer with the impact and time distillation of the pandemic. But you know what? It's okay because No Way Home is well worth the fucking wait. Again, no spoilers, let's discuss what I can. No Way Home's screenplay is the bread and butter of this movie. It is with all movies, obviously, but here it's brilliantly layered and tightly focused on three main components: scourging Peter Parker and making him suffer at every single turn, giving the multiverse villains a fresh spin and a bigger sense of purpose, and organically setting up the future and the stakes of the MCU franchise. First, let's talk about Peter Parker and his friends, as they are the driving factor of this story. If you aren't a fan of Tom Holland as Spider-Man up until now, if this movie doesn't sway or swing you onto his side, I don't think there's anything else he can do to make it. Because his performance here is exhilarating, captivating, maybe even his magnum opus, at least for now. But seriously, Holland has solidified himself as the nerdy, gleeful, and above all else, warm-hearted version of Peter Parker. It's so difficult to dislike him, like you gotta be a real hater to do so. He just plays a teenager struggling to live an ordinary life with his friends and family, with a certain aura of pureness and innocence around him that pushes you to feel for him. Perhaps it's his age, maybe it's charisma, but he absolutely nailed this Spider-Man performance to the coffin. And not only did I care for him, but I cared for Zendaya's MJ as well. Their ongoing chemistry on top of their official dating status has only elevated their romance in this movie, as you get to see two high school kids fall in love for the first time. While I enjoy Zendaya's take on her MJ, I'll be honest, even after this entire trilogy, I think she's the weakest of the three MJs. And hey, I love Zendaya. This is just my 2 cents. I do think it's partly to blame on her character having limited screen time and a puzzling attitude to deal with. But again, in No Way Home, she's giving it her all, and she sells those sad eyes and tears. I could feel the pain from 40 feet away. And lastly, on to Ned. Yo, shout out to Jacob B. I always disregarded his character in the other two Spider-Man entries, but I respect and love the fact that they give him some of the best lines and a memorable performance here. And that's another facet to address. This movie carries this trio group with a genuine proficiency and value. Whereas in the other two movies, I thought MJ and Ned were more or less treated as sideline characters, in part to them not being superpowered. This time around, they're placed dead center in the middle of the action and present themselves into situations where they're of authentic assistance. And they're not just chatting while Spider-Man is fighting someone else. As an example, if you think back to Godzilla vs. Kong, those kids had a storyline that led to utterly nowhere. It was just to add more human element to the story. And a lot of movies will do that, which is wholly pandering and derivative. But here, all three work together in scenarios that uplift their collective friendship and establishes pathos along the way. Alright, let's talk about the villains. Oh my god, they're so good. They are so good. What do we do to deserve this? I mentioned this earlier, but one of the most critical aspects going into this movie was how are they going to manage and balance all of these characters? It's a legitimate concern because we've seen this bag fumble twice now for Spidey. The original Spider-Man 3 got overloaded with Topher Grace's performance that will land him a one-way straight ticket to hell. Then the Amazing Spider-Man 2 tried to set up the Sinister Six with a mediocre and short-lived results. So now you've got Sandman, Electro, the Lizard, Doc Ock, and Green Goblin Goblin, all making appearances. How is this gonna flow? Well, they all come from their universes, confused and ready to beat some Peter Parker ass. And I figured the movie would introduce them one by one, which they mostly do, but my point of concern was who would get more spotlight. Would they change their personality traits, change their background, nerf or boost their powers? And what I'll say is this: each villain here was given an appropriate and congruous amount of screen time, enough so that you learn a lot more about their human aspects, as well as expanding on their motives and giving satisfactory conclusions to each of their respective stories. And that was super unexpected. Huge praise to the entire antagonist front. They all received excellent quips, interesting conversations about their mindsets, and even more intriguing dialogue exchanges from all of them just meeting one another. Of course, I just have to highlight Willem Dafoe's Green Goblin performance. It's everything you could have asked for and more. He's viciously corrupted, twisted, and more menacing than ever. However, I do wish he had a little bit more time. As weird as that may sound, I do firmly think he had a scene or two that might have been shafted from the original cut, because there ought to have been at least a little bit more development for him and not so many editing cuts. Alright, let's just do a quick bullet fire of some last thoughts here. The action sequences are spectacular, especially Peter versus Strange's New York City Inception sequence. Although sometimes I will say that the CGI is overwhelmingly overshadowing a sequence that you can just notice when something's blatantly happening in a green screen room with some choreography. But nonetheless, the Marvel standard is there. The absurdity is present. You won't be disappointing on this front. The humor is so much better. Oh my god, Marvel might have actually gotten a good writer for once. Let's go! Minus the repeated Scooby-Doo line that someone decided to keep in there. I know I've given this movie a lot of love, but there are some small gripes that I do have with it. The first third or half of the movie can be fatiguing in that they really do have to cover a lot and explain a lot of things before things actually pick up the pace. Spoiler, but not really spoiler, though. With great power comes great responsibility was done a little too on the nose and took me away from that scene. I think some narrative choices were unattractive. Not a lot, but namely Peter's decision against Doctor Strange's boxer quest felt forced for the sake of plunging the plot over the edge so that everything can just go. And this might be a more technical opinion, but now that we have 3 sets of Spider-Man movies, I'll say this. Tobey's is still arguably the best, Holland's is very well rounded, and Garfield's was brief, yet passable. But what I want to say is that with both Maguire and Garfield's movies, you can see some strokes of creativity with the directors. But with this trilogy, Watts doesn't strike me as someone who ever pushes the envelope. He simply seals the envelope and creates intimate storytelling with Marvel-esque action. And while all of Holland's movies are good, they just don't have any distinguishable flair, like how Thor Ragnarok was a colorful comedy blast, or Guardians of the Galaxy felt like a true adventure movie. I don't know, but they hired him 3 times for a reason and it paid off well. I just hope with him directing Fantastic Four and a hugely successful trilogy to backing up that maybe he'll be more opportunist to have some more experimental or unconventional filmmaking and just rather than just playing things safe and sound. Anyways, look, the point is this: Spider-Man No Way Home is an emotionally charged, spectacularly written, and fan-serviced project that delivers on the hype. Go see it, go see it, go see it, go see it in theaters with the crowd of your friends in a packed theater. I'm gonna give No Way Home an 8.5, and I'm excited to see where Tom Holland takes this comic book character next. Until next time, guys,